Okay, good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, October 26th, 2021, and we're going to get started here with our pre-market analysis on the S&P 500 futures market. Just really quick to sum up yesterday, remember that despite all of the bearish signals that we were getting, counter to this nice bullish trend, we still expected higher, so we expected to break the highs of the day before, which were up around 5150 here, and go ahead and push up to new all-time highs. And sure enough, it took a little bit of time. So, the market opened and actually got a pretty nice sell-off, but then we found support right around kind of a nice healthy retracement of the push up from the overnight session there, got the recovery and went ahead and pushed to break the all-time high from yesterday, which was at 5150, and go ahead and find the new all-time highs. We got a pullback and a bounce 1 point in front of 5150, where if you were in our trade room yesterday, you saw I put a limit order in here at 5150 and just walked away from the computer and just was going to see how that level played out. It came 1 point in front and bounced at 5250, where arguably there really was nothing as far as structure in the market goes, and got the bounce out of there. And then we went ahead and pushed to a new all-time high towards the end of the session there, and then into the Globex. You can see we're continuing to push ever so higher here in these little inches. So we get a little inch up, some sideways, and another little inch up to new all-time highs. So let's go ahead and jump up and take a look at our ultra high time frames here and start to build a picture for this morning's market. Unfortunately, I'm pretty sure I haven't gone through and done the exact pre-market analysis here, but I did look at everything, and it seems like we're pretty much in the same thing that we've been in for about 4 or 5 days in a row here. So let's go up to our quarterly chart. Quarterly chart looking really strong. Again, we talked about the fact that the current quarterly candle, which doesn't close until the end of November, has this huge wick to the downside. And when we've had huge wicks to the downside in the past, essentially almost every time we have continuation to the upside. So we'll see if this picture looks the same as we get to the end of November. Right now looking very strong, no signs of exhaustion. Our monthly, we did get a little bit of an exhaustion pattern back in September, and we actually kind of talked about it. Remember at the beginning of September, we talked about this potential bearish signal. But it looks like going into this new monthly candle for October, the bulls just jumped right back in, and we've got this beautiful bullish engulfing candle. We have today, tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday, and then this candle will close. So, unless there's some type of crazy flash crash here, we are going to have a nice bullish engulfing bar here on the monthly, which is a good omen for the bulls. So typically, again, if you go back to the past and you look at, the bullish engulfing candles, they typically lead to continued push higher. Doesn't mean it's guaranteed to happen, but that's what we're seeing right now. Quarterly and monthly looking strong as always. And then we get down to our weekly, and this is the situation we're in. And we talked about this for a few days now. The fact that because the RVI, after this correction, this nice pullback from the all-time highs back at the beginning of September, because the RVI pulled back, and as price advanced here, the RVI did not advance as strong, we do have the case where essentially until we get all the way up to about 81 here, down here on the RVI, we're going to have arguments for bearishness. Just keep in mind that as long as we have this straight line going up, it's not necessarily what we want to be looking at. So essentially what we want, and let's see if we can get a better example or maybe even an example on this chart. What we want to look for is an actual peak. So it's kind of unfortunate because a weekly chart takes a long time to develop, and then for the candle to close, and then for the next candle to develop and close. But essentially we need to wait until we have a nice defined peak there before we can create, at least the way I read divergence, that's what we have to wait for. So as price continues to push and make higher highs here, if the RVI continues to be a flat line, we really don't have an argument for the reversal until we actually have this nice defined peak here. And then we could have a higher high on price, a lower high on RVI with a nice defined apex right there on both ends. And then we could say, okay, now we've got our bearish divergence at this point, assuming that, you know, this next bar continues to carry through with this pattern so we get that peak. It very well could be that that next bar continues and now we get a continued straight line, which means we have to then just reconsider. And so right now, look at the previous candle. We said we do have a lower RVI and a higher price, but as this next weekly candle, which is this week's candle, which again will close on Friday afternoon, when this started developing, we got this continuation up. So right now, this bearish argument is no longer there because we've got a continuation in this RVI line. So until we get this actual peak to compare with, we essentially don't have anything. But there's still the argument, because keep in mind that this candle could close on Friday, and then the next candle that opens, we could have that actual apex, right? So we have to keep in mind that there is an argument, but it takes a while for confirmation. So that's what makes these higher time frames much harder to kind of read in real time, because there's still a vast amount of time in the future where this picture could drastically change. So I've kind of spent a lot of time on these ultra high time frames. Let's go down and start looking into some of these more actionable time frames for trades. When we get into our daily, we have no argument for bearishness right now. Remember, doesn't mean we're not going to get a pullback, but right now, just looking at the signals that we look at, we have that beautiful bullish divergence back from October 1st, which again, we've emphasized a lot if you watch some of our pre-markets from the last few weeks, how great that was. And then that pullback back on October 12th, in fact, on that morning, again, we spent a lot of time on this in other pre-markets, kind of boasting about the fact that on the morning of the 12th, we had an argument from the daily all the way down for bullishness. And we said we expected a break from this little triangle formation to the upside. And just look at this beautiful push. We're now 43.20, 45.70, 250 points up from there. So up top, no arguments for bearishness right now. Everything just looks normal. So I would expect, just looking from here, that we're still strong on the daily. So there's all four of our high time frames, from the ultra going into the high time frames, giving us the bullish case. This is where it starts to get tricky. And this is what we've had for 5 days now. So if we go back to Monday, we go to Friday, we go to Thursday, we go to Wednesday, and I think even arguably we go back to Tuesday of last week, we basically had the same exact kind of what's the word for it? We have kind of the same scenario or the same look to the market. So for 4 or 5 days, the exact same kind of situation here. We've got bearish arguments from the previous daily highs, and we have bearish arguments from the overnight high. So pretty much that's what we've seen again for a few days. But then we have bullish arguments from the lows. So if we go back to the previous daily low here, this nice bright green line right around that 45.22, we got a really clear bullish divergence on this 4 hour back at the end of what was that? I think that was in the middle of Sunday's Globex. We got a really nice bullish divergence on the 4 hour, and then you can see follow through coming into the overnight session here for today. So we have kind of two arguments. We got bearish arguments from the overnight high, and then from the high that we made just at the beginning of Globex. But then we also have the bullish case off the lows that we made. And even right now, you can kind of see that we're lower on RVI here, but the price is much higher compared to when the peak was down here. So even somewhat of a bullish argument right now off the lows that we made off this most recent 4-hour candle. So I'm just kind of stressing the fact that we have good arguments on both end, and that's what we've had for a few days. On the 60-minute, same thing again. Bearish right at the beginning of Globex, bearish off the overnight high in our Globex session, but then bullish arguments off the lows. So previous daily low, nice bullish divergence. Nice bullish divergence on the pullback that we got yesterday, and then a nice bullish divergence just when Globex opened, and then on this little pullback here down to this 66 quarter right around midnight last night on the Pacific Coast, another nice bullish argument. So it's just one of those cases where it could potentially go either way, and that's what we've said for the last week. However, we have much more arguments for a continued bullish push when we look to the ultra high time frames. So if the ultra high time frames all had pretty clear bearish signals, then we would probably say this morning then we would put more weight on the expectation for a pullback, for some type of sell-off. But because all four ultra high time frames going into the high time frames basically say we're strong with no signs of exhaustion, then we can put a little bit more weight on the bullish side here. We just need to keep in mind that pretty much the 4-hour all the way down to the short time frames is showing the bearish case off the highs. And you can see here, back on, in fact it was here, back October 19th, we had a bearish case off the highs from the 4-hour. And then going into the Globex session on the afternoon of the 19th, another bearish case. And then another bearish case going into the end of the day on the 20th. And then the overnight, or actually going into the overnight for the 21st. And then the high of the day on the 22nd. And then the Globex session last night. So it just continues to build and build and build. But then the bulls continue to follow through on the bullish continuation patterns off lows. So we talked about the 60-minute here. Let's go down to the intermediate time frames. I don't think they're really going to add anything to the story here. Essentially, we have on the 30-minute really clear bearish divergences off the highs that we saw on all the other time frames, and then got really clear bullish divergences off all the lows. So that's where we're at this morning. The 10-minute, again, is just going to agree with pretty much every single signal, essentially. I mean, there is an argument here for this consecutive bar, or subsequent bar here, for that bearishness off that peak higher there. And again, just lots of bearish arguments off highs, bullish off lows. Something just to note, which again, I really like to emphasize, fib retracements and extensions, because they do seem to work out more often than not. In this case, we got the push from the low just after the open, after that pretty nice sell-off right at the open and the recovery. If you look at the leg from the low up to the highs we made for that daily session there, going into 11:30, the pullback was a little shallow. Remember, I had a long right at 51.50 here off this previous structure in the market there. They came down to 52.50, and really it was kind of a shallow pullback, about a 25% retracement of that leg, and then we got the push up. The reason I'm mentioning this is the fact that the 27 extension, had you have been over here and you saw them launch, and they never made it even to the 38 or this previous high at 51.50, but they did start launching, you could have thrown a fib up there and had an expectation that we were going to push up here into this 73.50 area. And then look what ended up happening. It took until it went into Globex, but eventually in Globex we came right up, peaked right into that 73.50. I think broke it by maybe a point and a half, and then got a pullback, and then basically stayed sideways here for a while, and then eventually came up again, tested that level almost to the tick, pulled back, and then eventually we broke through and then started chugging to higher levels. But just kind of interesting to note there. So I'll leave it at that. We're getting a little bit long-winded here. For those on our YouTube, for our YouTube audience, we'll leave it at that. We're going to jump over to our shorter time frames, put our eye levels on the chart, and start looking at some potential good support and resistance levels to work with coming into the open this morning. So have a great day.